Welcome, everyone. This is the fourth ENPOR lunch talk. I'm Eva Schuber from Climate Alliance, and we will focus today on tailored actions against energy poverty with invited guests from the STEP project. Most of you already know ENPOR as a Horizon 2020 project lasting 3 years to tackle energy poverty in the private rented sector. And maybe you also followed the work of the STEP project, where 10 consumer and research organizations work together to tackle energy poverty by providing advice to consumers, training for frontline workers, and advocacy to European national legislators on the importance of tackling energy poverty with energy efficiency measures. Our guests today on behalf of the STEP project are Owen Kelly from the European Consumer Organization, Paulo Fonseca from the Portuguese Association for Consumer Protection, Bogomil Nikolov from the Bulgarian Consumer Organization, and Petra Čakovská from the Slovak Consumer Organization. On the other hand, I welcome Altan Sahin from the Austrian Energy Agency, and Marek Müster from the Estonian Tartu Regional Energy Agency. Unfortunately, Florin Wondung from the Wuppertal Institute in Germany couldn't be here with us due to health reasons, but he says very much hello. And Altan and Marek will talk to you about the work of their regional energy action groups in the respective countries. And I'm going to let in some more participants as we speak. So we are living in turbulent times. There's I think no way around it, with man-induced climate emergency tightening its grip, the decreasing stock of fossil fuels, energy dependency, inefficient private housing, and war. And these are all problems for all of us, but especially for people in vulnerable situations, these are not easy times. High energy bills are one of the many issues energy poor families and people need to deal with. And without further ado, I will ask some questions from our panelists and hope that you will be happy to hear all the different situations and all the solutions existing around Europe. You will also have time to ask your questions at the end of our discussion. Also, you can use the chat function to ask questions. In the meantime, we are going to gather it and ask them at the end. Paulo, how does Portugal deal with the situation currently unfolding? And what are your experiences on the national policy landscape changing for energy poverty? Do you see any measures tackling the private rented sector in Portugal?
Good afternoon, and thank you. Too many questions. I will try to summarize everything in just 5 minutes. It will be very difficult, but to answer your first question very directly, we see the situation with concern, of course. Though Portugal hasn't been directly affected by the Russian gas situation, if we can call it, we mustn't forget that the energy price is still defined at a European level, and of course the price of the natural gas is one of the major indicators for the electricity price in Portugal. There are still some measures that the government has been taking, and some of them by request of our organization. I won't talk about the measures that have been taken regarding fuel, but regarding the energy market. We know that the regulated tariffs are increasing. Until now, the regulated tariffs have increased like 88% regarding the last year, which is to say a lot for consumers. The energy bill is one of the highest bills that the consumers pay in Portugal, because one part is the energy price, the other one, which is like 60% of the energy bill, is tax and levies. And of course, the wholesale market price is also part of the energy bill. And there are now discussions for the reduction of the VAT system. Until now, consumers would really need to pay an average of 23%. I would say an average because it depends on several issues, but the majority of consumers pay 23% in terms of VAT for the energy bill. What we have been demanding the government is to reduce for 6%. The government is in discussions with the European Commission to try to reduce to 13%. It's a little bit, it's something, but it's not what we need. And for energy poverty, because it's clearly related, because we are talking about, and this is something that we are trying to change, because when we discuss energy poverty issues, we're always discussing about vulnerable consumers or consumers that are in a situation of economic vulnerability. But being an energy poverty consumer is not being, you couldn't be only a vulnerable consumer in terms of economic issues, but you can have health problems, social issues, and you can be in a situation of energy poverty. It depends on other issues, namely housing. If you are buying your own house, you're in the rental market, it's also an issue for the energy poverty. But until now, there is no definition in Portugal for the energy poverty. There is already a strategy, a proposal for a strategy to tackle and to mitigate the energy poverty at the long and medium term, but it still has to be published. Just to say something, because we are also part of the STEP project, and this project was clearly important for the proposal of this strategy, because with the recommendations, one part of the project is, of course, Owen will explain it better than me, but one part of the project is advocacy, and we will try to consolidate some recommendations for the national governments. And one of these recommendations was to create a strategy to have some measures to tackle energy poverty, to create a network of energy advisors, for example. This is something that is already in the proposal. So we are still waiting for it to be published. There are already social tariffs for the electricity and natural gas, of course. But if we are talking about housing, it must be said that in Portugal, houses are not efficient. If you look into the majority of the Portuguese houses, and if you look into the energy certificates that they have, most of them are very low. We are talking about the letters like D and F, in A to F, which is the lowest that we have. So we are looking at the sustainable buildings proposal for the revision of the directive and the energy efficiency with very concern, because time is counting and there are still a lot to be done. There are already also some measures regarding energy poverty consumers, at least as the government says, because government is always linking energy poverty consumers to a situation of consumers that are benefiting from social tariffs. So you have two kinds of programs. Most of them come from the Resilience and Recovery Plan. One of them is to retrofit your own house, what we call the Sustainable Buildings Program, but it's a program that is first come, first served, and you first need to do the investment and then you can be reimbursed. So if you're talking about consumers that are benefiting from social tariffs or consumers that are in a situation of more vulnerability, it could be very difficult to invest to retrofit your own house. But then you can have another program, which is a voucher that is delivered to consumers that are benefiting from social tariffs. This consumer is about 1,000 euros, and you can use it to invest, for example, to buy more efficient appliances to your own house, for example. But there is one exclusion that is common to both of these programs. It only applies to consumers that own their own house. So if you are in the rental market, you cannot use these programs. And this is part of the problem that we also have today. The first one is that we have like 4 million households, and almost 1 million comes from the rental market. This rental market is not regulated. There are no incentives for tenants regarding energy efficiency. As you can see, most of the consumers that are in the rental market cannot benefit from these programs. And of course, we have seen an investment in terms of policies regarding housing and the rental market. Since 2018, there is what we call a new generation of housing policies that created new laws that try to change the rental market in terms of legislation. But until now, it has been very difficult because you have to count with tourism, of course. And if you, in most of the programs are only related and only concerned regarding, only tackle consumers that are in a very vulnerable situation. So if you look into the middle class, if you are a family with 2 children, for example, you come to the city because you work there and you need to find an apartment, you have to take into account that in Portugal, the minimum salary today is about 700 euros. And if you look into the apartment with 2 bedrooms, for example, you couldn't find an apartment below 1,000 euros per month. So this says a lot regarding the problem. So besides that, you don't have, for example, energy poverty measures for these consumers, because if you rent your own apartment, the less rent you pay, the less conditions you have. So this is something, because the buildings are very old. So the landlord is not up to do an investment because he only goes there to collect the rent. There is no incentive, there is no regulation. We are claiming and we are asking the need to put energy and housing in terms of rental market together. And if the landlord wants to rent his apartment, then he needs to do some retrofit of their own house to put an adequate level in terms of energy efficiency. There are also some local strategies, and I'm going to end this first question for you, but there are some local strategies that have been developed. We have been working with municipalities, and I will explain it later in terms of the field, but we are working with them to create local strategies, not only in terms of social housing, but also developing houses to rent for the rental market in terms of for the middle class, with retrofits, with more new generation in terms of energy consumption, like use of renewables, self-consumption of energy communities.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good picture. So obviously, what would be important in Portugal is to change policies that in the direction where, in terms of rental market, the homeowner has an incentive to renovate. Right, because we are all in this together. Thank you for that. Altan, in Austria, several policy changes are currently in the making, such as the Condominium Act to make it easier to pass resolutions in the Owners Association that would allow an easier kickstart for energy efficient renovation. However, tenants still cannot really enforce, let's say, a heating system exchange, right, or similar. And also the CO2 tax is now to be introduced in Austria. What burden do you see with this combined with the energy crisis on the energy poor households in a private rental situation?
Thank you, Eva. Also, hello from my side to everyone. Yeah, the timing for the introduction of this new CO2 tax is quite unlucky from our point of view, as currently, due to the energy crisis, a lot of households are already facing doubling of the energy bills currently already. For existing customers, new customers are facing even higher increases in the energy bills. And this means for low-income households especially, or energy poor households in our context, that they are faced with a share of 10 to up to even 20% of the monthly income necessary only to pay their energy bills. So the situation is rather grave from our point of view. There are already several measures in Austria also planned to support households and to kind of work against this additional pressure on them. But what we see here in Austria, that those measures usually lack, I'd say, a targeted nature of implementation. As, for example, regarding the new CO2 tax, there's also a new climate bonus planned to be introduced together with it. This climate bonus will be paid to each household in Austria based on the number of people living in it and the region where the household is located. And this new climate bonus will be ranging from 100 up to 200 euros per person depending on where the household lives, and it will be financed through the incomes of this new CO2 tax. And this leads to the situation that it kind of does not create a real incentive to save energy, as each household is receiving this money. It does not depend on your energy consumption. And those who are in grave need of additional support due to the current situation do not receive additional support through this new instrument. Of course, there are also other measures in Austria, for example, for the year 2022, the costs for eco or green electricity costs were set to 0. Usually they are part on the energy bill, where you have to pay additional costs for green electricity, for the support of clean electricity. They were reduced due to the energy crisis, but again, this is an instrument for every household here, and not a targeted approach to support energy poor households. And for the work in our REACT group here in Austria, this was also the main point that we have discussed up until now, that a lot of stakeholders see a need for a more target-friendly and target group-focused approach in communication and in working with energy poor households. And here in Austria, we see energy advisors as an important means to get access to those households and to support them and provide them with some form of support and also empowerment. As in Austria, we are in the situation that tenants do not have really any means of, and I'd say maybe not enforcing, but implementing energy efficiency measures in their homes, as the decision on this solely lies at the owners. So what we wanted to implement in the first phase of our project was to kind of empower households to at least be able to implement measures where they have the power in their own hands, I'd say, to implement energy saving measures for their own homes, and to mostly focus on behavioral changes. And for this purpose, in our REACT group, we have created a new information material for energy advisors to use, because the old format was not really suitable for the target group of energy poor households, as mostly they are currently dealing with middle-class households. And our target group here in Austria, as in the energy poor household group, we are also having a lot of people who are not having German as their mother tongue, and we thought that making the communication easier and focusing more on visual language and kind of presenting the necessary information in a different target group friendly way was the approach that we implemented. And in our group, we therefore worked out new information material for energy poor households, for the consultation of new households, which is an important result. There's a lot of interest from many stakeholders in Austria to use it already. So there really is a need is already there for this kind of new approach of communication. But there are also other measures happening already as a first try in targeting energy poor households directly, as now there's basically a pilot running for a new subsidy for energy poor households in Austria, a 100% subsidy for the replacement of a heating system. So really the state is willing to cover the full costs, but currently this is only available for single family householders as a first try to kind of implement a new subsidy where the state covers the full cost, but they have to define clearly who is eligible. So we'll have to see, because the long-term goal is also to support tenants with this kind of subsidy, but currently the discussions are still going on how we could implement this. So, but this is at least a first try, as a first step. We're trying to go in this direction here.
Yeah, this is a very interesting try, especially in terms of how the conditions will work. And I think what you mentioned about communication with tenants in the current situation where refugees coming from Ukraine, they will obviously not going to purchase any new homes. They're going to be renters probably for the first years when they remain, and obviously language is an important point here. We will come back to hear more on this, but I would ask now Petra, it takes years and a lot of money for the state and for the municipalities to transition to renewable energy. And that is expected to ease the heavy burden of fossil energy dependency. Your organization introduced the Energy Ombudsman in Slovakia. Can an energy ombudsman break down the walls or avoid building up new barriers to access clean energy for vulnerable groups? I'm sure we're all interested to hear more about this solution, and also if you explored how your project and how your idea could be implemented in other countries. We would love to hear more about that.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. This is a very difficult question, and to be able to answer it, let me describe you a little bit the situation in Slovakia. As we know, after the pandemic, energy crisis, and the war in Ukraine, now the situation hit hardest especially on vulnerable groups. The situation is the same in Slovakia, and according to our national bank, we will have 14% inflation next year. There are also prognoses that the food products will increase up to 30% next year, and this is very scary prediction, because in Slovakia we have one of the highest distribution prices for energy in EU, and also there are different statistics saying that actually Slovak households is giving the biggest amount of the income for the energy every month. So this situation is really very scary, and not only for households but also suddenly and finally also for our politicians. There started political discussions on national level what measures should be implemented to protect selected groups of vulnerable households, and we now speaking about single parent families, which have more children, people who are living alone, and seniors, and then people with all sorts of health disabilities. And as we see now, every political party in Slovakia has its own recipe or view what would be the best. Currently, they discuss also how to actually end our dependence from Russian gas, and they discuss if the best solution would be nuclear power, hydrogen, coal, or renewable sources of energy, because we still hear some opinions that coal should be the way to go forward, very surprisingly. So just to focus on energy poverty in Slovakia, we have a definition, but this definition is maybe 7 years old, and at the stage it was created, it was not useful then, and it's not useful now, and we don't have any special or specific state financial schemes for vulnerable households to renovate their homes at all yet. So my organization, my consumer organization SOS, we advocate for a social tariff for households with low income, and also we negotiate very strongly for new state schemes to be created, which will focus on different groups of vulnerable households, and which will cover ideally 100% of their renovation costs. So this should allow them to rebuild their houses, to be first more energy efficient, and then to transform their heating system to renewable. Very big success we consider to be our coalition with environmental NGOs in Slovakia, and 2 weeks ago we actually got a message from Ministry of Environmental Protection that based on our advocacy activities, they stopped state support of 20 million euros for households which wanted to transfer from heating with coal or wood or even rubbish for the poorest Roma communities to gas boilers. So we stopped this subsidy for gas boilers for now. And now the discussion how should be this 20 million used started. So when we are talking about energy ombudsman, it was introduced in Slovakia last year, but not by my organization. It was our idea, but it was introduced by our energy regulator, and we cooperate with its office very closely. This is very unique experience for our organization, but I have to say it is also very unique experience for the state regulator, because Slovakia is the post-Soviet country with very strongly regulated energy market. There is no tradition of cooperation between the state and NGO or between the state and consumer organization, not even in this kind of services. And we are very happy that the energy regulator actually uses our experiences from the field, because we are providing direct advice to consumers in our advice centers, to use our experiences when they are dealing with consumers disputes themselves. So this is a very good way, we believe, even if it's a short time since we started, to increase the protection and especially the enforcement of consumer rights on Slovak energy market. But here also we need to understand that if we are talking about the access to clean energy in Slovakia, it is still very limited for all households, not only for vulnerable ones, because we are very late with the implementation of 3 or 4 very important energy EU directives. We have very complicated administration if you want to, for example, produce your own energy through PV panels. You have to wait 3 months for the registration, or you can be penalized when you want to give energy you produced back to the grid. You can be even penalized for this, and there are many other market barriers to every household to actually transfer to renewable heating systems. So when we talk in this regard about vulnerable groups, it is impossible for them by themselves to get to clean energy, because we have now 2 main state schemes. But for the first one, if you want to make your home more energy efficient, or you want to install PV panels or heat pumps, you need to have 40 to 60% of co-financing, which is impossible for these people. And also you need to register through the specific registration system of our ministry, which is open in the certain second or minute. And for example, for heat pumps, the subsidies were gone in 4 hours. For electromobility, it was gone in 1 hour. So it's not at all prepared for people who are not IT skilled or don't have computer, are old, or living in rural areas.
Yeah, so it's there are a lot of barriers and it's not easy to access, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So together with the energy ombudsman, we joined forces, because it's very strong coalition between NGO area, and this could be my recommendation also for our other countries, with the state regulation, with the state institution, and we lobby together for special financial incentives for vulnerable, and pursue also our step recommendations for legislation changes to make it easier to produce your own energy for consumers, because together with our energy regulator, we strongly believe that prosuming energy is also a very good solution for vulnerable groups of consumers. And together with our energy regulator and ombudsman, we also prepared an action plan on how to deal with energy poverty in Slovakia. And last thing I wanted to mention is that this year we are preparing 2 collective purchases, one for heat pumps and one for PV panels. And this will be also a very good practical exercise for Energy Ombudsman even, to be ready and able to help also with this new era of possible consumer disputes connected with installation of renewable sources of energy or installations. And we are already started to think what are our capacities. We, I mean, consumer organization, but also the energy regulator. So what are our capacities to be able to manage this new sector and to help consumers with all needs, doubts, or questions they can have during their journey to clean energy at home, because this is very new era in Slovakia. Standard households, not even vulnerable ones, don't have enough information. So it will be also very important to introduce a network of one-stop shops somehow. We have some ideas, and it's actually the main power or the advantage of this ombudsman is that there are two sources of experiences from different points, but together it's easier to be heard by other authorities.
Yeah, so collaboration is
easier,
key, basically.
it's easier for small consumer organization to communicate to ministries when you have energy regulator behind your back.
Yeah. I think collaboration of regulator or authorities and NGOs is definitely one of the key lessons learned also from ENPOR. Marek, I think you can also tell long stories about this, being one of the leaders of your REACT group. In Estonia, the key strategy to fight energy poverty especially in the private rented sector is energy efficient renovation and retrofitting, right? So Marek, what do you think? How can the split incentives actually be avoided in the private rented sector? And if you have a solution, how can it be adopted in other countries?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the renovation is that well-renovated building makes everybody happy, right? It's good for the municipality, it's good for the community around it, it's good for the people who are living, inside the building, both the owners and the tenants. So there is a big incentive in the renovation. In fact, it's such an important process that we truly believe that well-renovated and affordable housing stock is the key measure to reduce the energy poverty in our communities. Now, it's there are several challenges of that, and not even to start with the fiscal questions, where does the money come from, etc., etc. But also the way Estonia is approaching this has kind of unique twist, because for us the renovation is a what we call collective action. It's always started by the inhabitants, by the owners, and is partially financed by the owners or fully financed, depending of the financial model. So it really asks the question, who are the interested parties, and what kind of responsibilities should they have in the renovation process. Now, one very important thing to understand here is that not everybody has to be on board. So this is important, because in our case, in our communities, our buildings have very mixed social structure. So we have people with a very different backgrounds, with a different social status, financial capacity, etc. And it needs to be, majority vote to go into the renovation process, which means that the apartments that are not active or are not very interested of the renovation process, they can have their own opinion, but if the majority of the community decides that the building must be renovated, it will be renovated and everybody will win. Now, one very important thing to understand here is the affordability aspect. So for us, it's important to ensure that the living costs will not increase as an outcome of the renovation process, which means that you get better building, you get better living conditions, you get better indoor quality, you get better energy performance, but you should end up paying roughly the same, or it's acceptable to have a little bit higher payment at the end. And the higher payment is related with how the building market is moving. We in our country have one of the highest price increase for real estate, for apartments. This is the highest in Europe. More than our housing prices have doubled in 10 years. But everybody has, every country sees the significant increase of the building stock. And this is related how Europe is functioning fiscally, how we are levering out the last energy crisis. Our decision was to print more money, and these printing presses are still functioning. So there is no, there's no short of money. There is a lot of money. The banks are getting, the commercial banks are getting money from with the zero interests. And it's only the question of how this money is divided and how this money is putting back into the communities. And this is what is different in countries. In our case, we try to, our government tries to offer a dedicated renovation grant that, basically make sure that the renovation will be affordable. So that's the key issue here to remember. And it will be affordable both for the owner and both for the tenant. There is no big like split here. So these are the basic measures that countries can do, and some countries are doing that. There are several similar renovation schemes also in other European countries. But it's a lot of that. It's depending on the national policy, how this new free money that Brussels and Frankfurt and other parties are throwing into the table, like take this money, like use it somehow. And some countries are investing that into their industries, and some countries are investing that into their housing stock. Our suggestion here is that if you use that money for improving the living conditions, make sure that everybody will win. Like make sure that there is no...
There's a win-win situation. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That there will not be social parties or social groups that will be excluded from that.
Yeah, we have to make sure of that.
This is what we try to do.
Yeah, yeah. And in Estonia, you have also a lot of multi-apartment buildings that what you were also talking about, that the ownership needs to have to have a majority vote to renovate. And this that brings me to a different kind of group with different living condition. Bogomir, in your country, you were tackling a community, the Roma community, through studies and workshops in Sofia. Can you tell a little bit about your experience and how hard it was to reach this community, and how did you tackle energy poverty in this community? What are your experiences in terms of barriers in reaching out to them, and how did you deal with these barriers?
Actually, we did much more. We managed to enter these people's houses to get on the spot, and made many personal contacts with them. And what makes me very proud of is that we set up a network with Roma organizations like Roma Foundation and Community Center that were very enthusiastic to spread the knowledge, because it may surprise you, but more than 80% of these Roma households, they are owners of their buildings. They may look small, energy inefficient, with leaking roofs, etc., but they own their houses. Only a small minority of Roma households live in social houses, usually provided by the local municipalities, but we focused our work in our visits in the compact Roma quarters, where actually all 100% of the people were owners of their houses. The other people, they used to live in different parts of the city, not in compact areas, and they stayed outside of our activities. But we had some contacts with municipality of Sofia, and they were very honest with us by saying that in the past 30 years, nothing was done, not a penny invested in energy improvements, efficiency of these social houses. They were completely left on itself. Going back to the Roma communities, we were surprised to see how interested they were in getting knowledge about the energy efficiency, about how to save by only changing behavior without any investments. Although, but at the same time, they were very interested, and they always asked how to find more information about available financial schemes, financial help to improve the conditions of their buildings. Unfortunately, there were not many funding schemes over the last years, and we were not able to make them happy, you know, but at least we managed to raise the knowledge on how to make some savings without any investment. For the moment, this is what is realistic, what is possible. You can reduce your bill by 10-15%, even more, without investing any money, which is, I think, very practical solution for every single household, not only Roma. And in fact, we were campaigning not only in the Roma community. This was only one of our, how to say, targets, but we realized that networking, that building a group of allies of several organizations working together, cooperating, empower us a lot, because I'm very optimistic that in the next years we may suggest even more to those people, not only advice, but also further consultancy. For example, or I was talking about available funds. Lack of such funds is how to say, easy part. But imagine next year you have let's say available programs to finance, but they are very requiring to those people. They have to fill in forms, fill in applications. They need to supply it with some they need to pass some paperwork and stuff like this in order to be successful. And then comes the assistance of this network of advisors, of organizations that may be useful for them. So this is a little look into the future. And I will finish by joining the other colleagues. Many of the colleagues said that lack of targeted energy poverty policy is a challenge. We don't have such definitions as in many countries, although last week we were invited to join the working group in the Ministry of Energy. So I hope this process will develop. Once we have, once we adopt a definition, then the targeted policies may be triggered, and we may be much more
in a better position.
In a better position,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
very soon.
Yeah. Thank
so
you.
I stop here.
Thank you. Yes, I gather that energy poverty for all of you is not only energy issue, but also a social issue. And if one can say that any supportive measure that requires action for energy poor households must speak to this reality, so to say. It should be easy to access, it should be easy to understand, and it should be easy to implement. So before we finish, Owen, STEP is now coming to an end. Unfortunately, it would be great if our projects wouldn't just be running for 3 years, but we could see these measures develop over time. And you will have a final event on the 18th of May. Now, you oversee the entire process of STEP. What were the biggest challenges for the partnership and for you in the project, and what are you most proud of? What is the result that you think is really great and transferable to other situations?
Thanks, Eva, and thanks to all the speakers so far today. Yeah, you're right. We do have a final event coming up on the 18th of May. We'll send the invitation out to our Brussels network probably in the coming week. And if anyone doesn't hear from us, please get in touch via the BEOC website or the stepenergy.eu website, and we'll be happy to invite you along as well. Yeah, in terms of challenges, I think it's fair to say, you know, really at the core of the STEP project for the last 3 years was giving advice to consumers um, indirectly through training frontline workers in workshops and directly through advice either face to face or via the phone. As we all know, there was a pandemic for the last 2 years that put a stop to a lot of this kind of face-to-face interaction, whether it be end consumers or workshops for the bones of 2 years, which meant we had to, that was a significant impediment, and it meant we had to pivot to much more work on the phone lines as well as focusing more on online communications. So our partners in the UK created 11 YouTube videos on energy tips, which were shared online through YouTube and through social media, and the partners also translated them into 5 languages. But crucially, one of the things we worked on was online trainings, and I'll go into that as a transferable result in a moment. But what we discovered with moving online was, yes, this was a pretty good solution. It was the best we had at the time, but we also discovered something which we're now referring to in STEP as the digital gap. And perhaps unsurprisingly, when you think about it, a lot of people exposed to energy poverty are going to be the same people who are kind of living, let's say, digital poverty. They're less likely to have smartphones. They're less likely to have a permanent internet connection. And in turn, they're less likely to be on social media. They're less likely to see our videos, etc. So pivoting to the internet, you know, was a much better solution in a pandemic with such restrictions than it would have been 10 years ago when we didn't have such advanced communications, which is great, but at the same time, it raised problems that we need to take into consideration going forward with other projects that target vulnerable consumers. In terms of transferable results, as I mentioned, we created online trainings. Now, essentially, these are very similar to our in-person workshops for frontline workers. So they deal with a few things. Now, a frontline worker can be anyone whose job deals with an end consumer. So someone who's at risk of energy poverty or in energy poverty. So they could be social workers, they could be nurses, they could be volunteers, they could even be energy suppliers. And the type of education that it gives them is through online, through a series of slides, kind of like online university. It gives them an education in A, energy savings tips to share with consumers, B, national energy efficiency schemes or social tariffs consumers can apply for, but also information on the national energy market, the national energy system, because, you know, the energy system is different in all 9 countries of the STEP project. So those are available online, again, stepenergy.eu. They're currently available in 9 languages for 9 national contexts. But what we would really love to see with the end of the project is that we could transfer these to any interested partners who want them, get in touch with offices of mayors, get in touch with local authorities, and really collaborate, quite like something similar to what we've already seen with DECO in Portugal, collaborating with local authorities, and really disseminate all of this valuable info with frontline workers so they can go out and share it in the community. So that is absolutely something, you know, energy poverty, unfortunately, isn't going to go away with the end of the STEP project, nor the ENPOR project, but certainly there's a lot of space for further work, and I think it's a credit to the partners for all the work they've done over the last 3 years. It's been a pleasure to work with them. So on that note, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, definitely, I'm sure your resources are also useful for area groups. And I dare to say EPA, who's working with the local municipalities as we speak, certainly you can use your resources as well. And I'm sure it would be great if all capacity building resources would be available at a great and easy to access pace, right, for all of our sake. We are running short of time, although we prepared more questions and would have loved to give you more time. Paolo, there was one question for you. I don't know if you've seen it in the chat. Jean-Sebastien asked if the tax reductions in Portugal are for all consumers, or is there some kind of targeting?
I think that it depends. It depends on the type of tax. Usually the tax could be seen, for example, in terms of sustainability as an incentive. So, for example, if you're looking into electric mobility, for example, you can have a tax incentive, but also you can have a tax reduction for example, families that are in a situation of vulnerability. So that could be a different situation. I don't know, Eva, just can I have just 1 minute?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Owen was showing the importance of STEP, and for us, the STEP is clearly the first step for something that we want to work, and we want to take on board all the lessons that we learned from STEP. And one of them is already creating some good feedback in terms at local level, because we have managed to create with some municipalities what we call an housing and energy advice desk. We took the STEP project and the fact that we created inside our organization supporting office for energy, and we try to delocalize this type of office, because we provide information and advice to consumers that are not only in a situation of energy poverty, but in terms also of energy efficiency. But what we try to do is to join in one office something that we have been working, housing and energy, and creating an office at each municipality, having one of our skills, because we do have the know-how now with the STEP project, of course, to produce advice in terms of housing advice, how to reduce your energy bills, supporting consumers regarding social mechanisms and programs, tips for thermal comfort, for example, advice on mortgage credit, rental, advice on self-consumption, local accommodation for students, for example, insurances. We have already created some desks in some municipalities. What my message would be for consumer organizations, because these are also challenging times for consumer organizations, we probably will need to reinvent ourselves and to be more like the consumer's assistant, because Owen was talking about the digital gap, and something that we discovered with the STEP project was this kind of gap that consumers have. Because if you want to apply to the programs, for example, that I stated in the beginning, you have to have the digital skills to do that. But you could have a consumer organization, for example, trying to eliminate this gap, trying to create the bridge that you need to apply to this kind of mechanisms. So this is something that this could be a good notice for consumer organizations in the future to work more on in terms of other issues, trying to be with where the consumer is and trying to solve the problem where the consumer needs to be solved.
Thank you, Paulo. Thank you. Yeah, the one-stop shops are basically, it's a keyword that every municipality now, I think, know, definitely. And another keyword that we heard today, I think, is definitely collaboration, and working like local authorities or national authorities or regional authorities working together with NGOs and with organizations close to the people who are in need. I don't think it ever brought something bad in the history of humanity when we work together. And I think it's a wonderful closing word. Thank you, Paulo, for that as well. And thank you for everyone joining us. Please go and visit the website of STEP, and please join us for the next ENPOR lunch talk that will be announced soon. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.